Now the whole earth had one language, and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." Then the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one. They all have one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing they propose will be impossible for them. Let us go down and confuse their language, that they may not understand each other." So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of the earth. For context, you gotta ask, well, why did God confuse them? Well, a couple of chapters before that, in Genesis 9, God very explicitly tells Noah and his sons, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth." And so God tells them to do something, and people immediately ignore him. We can call this phenomenon spiritual physics. We see this emanate throughout the Bible. When you ignore the natural order of things, the spiritual world will naturally oppose your will. If you don't get that, don't worry, just give that idea some time. A while ago, I used to attend a church where I was talking with a friend who was something of an administrator at a private school that taught classical Christian education. And out of curiosity, I asked him, if you were in charge of the education system in America, what would it look like? He said, "I would base my entire curriculum off of the transcendental values, truth, goodness, and beauty, the objective attributes of God." And so I asked, well, how do you reconcile that with liberal secularism, which is what the world is composed of today? And he said, you can't. You can't reconcile secularism and liberalism with Christianity. It's impossible. I asked, why? And in short, he said, because in secular, liberal, or humanistic education, you have an obsession with concepts over meaning, activism over virtue, identity over character, information over wisdom, an ignorance of beauty, an aversion to profundity, an unclear definition of goodness, and an unsettled definition of truth. And so, that's why you can't reconcile secularism with religion, especially Christianity. You see, Christianity posits to claim the fullness of truth, whereas secularism posits that all truths are the same. And so, instead of accommodating religion, secularism simply has to remove religion altogether, because religion, specifically Christianity, makes spiritual claims that make people uncomfortable. The most prominent of these claims is the doctrine of salvation, and Christianity's claim to the only way to that salvation, which is Jesus Christ. So naturally, to avoid hurt feelings or unsettledness, rather than grappling with truth claims, by way of policy, education must be about information rather than truth, goodness, beauty, wisdom, virtue, and profundity. As such, the only way a student can explore ideas is within the confines of diversity, equity, inclusion, secularism, liberalism, and humanism. In so doing, it excludes anyone from having access to spiritual or emotional growth, and it limits the mind to cold, academic constraints. And what little that does happen in public schools regarding spiritual and emotional growth basically happens by accident, which is kind of sad on a multitude of levels. Or even more rare, this growth comes in the form of a genuinely committed teacher, which is hard to come by. And so schools have to begin to minimize subjects like public speaking, social emotional learning, physical education, rhetoric, debate, religion, financial efficacy, etc., as a way of keeping individuals from taking any ideological, philosophical, or religious expression as long as it posits a cold, dry form of universal humanism. The Tower of Babel is about man's attempts at solving problems without God. In light of the flood, man wanted to prevent its own demise a second time by creating something against God's wishes, which was to spread over the face of the earth. And so the people countered with, "Nah, let's just settle somewhere instead," which shows that man is always craving rebellion against God, but this story is more than God just trying to fulfill his command. It's a theme of spiritual physics, of what happens when man attempts to solve problems without God. Because God is objectivity, objective truth, goodness, and beauty. The one and only thing all people can come together on, whether they want to or not. In a world of relative morality and truth, no one can agree on anything, because in a world of relativity, all voices are equal, all religions are equal, and all truth is equal. And so, like the people of Babel, we have Babel in the modern education system, a clamoring of many voices, and no one can be fully heard. But what does this have to do with the world today? And what does it have to do with the education system in America? Well, the American education system is the modern-day Tower of Babel. In trying to solve world, national, societal, and individual problems in light of trying to be as diverse, equitable, and inclusive as possible, while trying to maintain the predominant paradigm of liberal, secular humanism, no one can be heard. Because no one can agree. Because there is so much to consider, and so much is yet to be considered. And in trying to fix the modern education system is like shouting into a room of Babel. It's a mess. Why? Because we are trying to do it without God, who is mistakenly confused for a person that meticulously controls all things or people like marionette puppets. But that's not God. God is the entity of existence itself, the objective source of how all things should be. And so without our common source of objective truth, goodness, and beauty, school feels dead, empty, hollow, because man is trying to define objectivity on its own accord, which leaves us with the problem you have probably faced in public schools. That being that no one can decide how to inspire within our students truth, goodness, and beauty, because no one can agree on what that is. But just imagine schools that produced profoundly insightful students, virtuous and competent leaders, beautiful and caring mothers, strong and wise fathers. When people want to create a world attuned to truth, goodness, and beauty to the glory of God, humanity thrives. And so we Christians have the battle laid out for us. That is the fight for reclaiming the educational space. It's not just an intellectual battle, and it cannot remain that way, but rather it is a spiritual one that goes back to the Tower of Babel, the Garden of Eden, the fall, and humanity's effort to reconcile with the divine. This series will continue. Till next time, God bless, and get out there and make better happen daily.